Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Cipher Brief virtual studio for a conversation today that will take us, metaphorically speaking anyway, to the bottom of the sea. There are many ways in which we learn periodically about China's ambitions in its neighborhood, shall we say, geopolitically. This week there was a big report in the Wall Street Journal based on research from the CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, about the ways in which China is expanding maritime exploration in waters, in some cases very far beyond its shores, and mapping the seabed and collecting data from the bottom of the sea. As one line in the piece said, conducting lawnmower-style sweeps of the ocean floor. We're joined today by Nick Thompson, member of our expert network, a former CIA paramilitary case officer, and also a Naval Special Warfare Development Group operator. And Nick, first of all, for those of us like myself who don't understand this very well, why is China doing this to the extent it is, and why does any major power spend so much time hoovering up data from the ocean floors?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Tom. So yeah, speaking to the most recent incident, as you said, mowing the grass, that is very unique, a unique pattern. Now, if a vessel tends to go from point A to point B, it's probably tracking something. Maybe it's collecting some kind of intel. Mowing the grass is a very operational act, as we would say, formally in the CIA. So what, to me, my assessment is that, that those ships that were there, very capable science and research ships, potentially running multi-beam echo sounder off the hull, which spreads out acoustic waves in a fan-like pattern, very good for covering large distances. And it's just going back and forth, collecting the sonar, and then post-mission product would be stitched together, and you'd have a nice, clear imagery of the seafloor. Now, why they want to do that could be many different things. Mm-hmm. That could be, looking for rare earth minerals, cobalt, copper, nickel, manganese. It could be oil and gas. Could be looking for natural gas. It could be inspecting some kind of cable or pipelines. There's lots of different reasons, but this isn't the first time. It certainly won't be the last around India. A couple years ago, a very capable vessel, the Yuan Wang class, I believe there's 4 active ones. Mm-hmm. Those also showed up right before the Indians decided to do a missile test. And so, even this year in January, you have Chinese vessels hanging around Sydney, Australia, actually diverting commercial aviation. So right. This is just it's fitting a pattern. It's to me it's very much intelligence gathering.
Yeah. Now I should have said at the outset, and you helped fill in some geographical blanks here. So as you say, some of the latest reporting has involved Chinese vessels in the Indian Ocean, much closer to Indian territory than to Chinese land. But also up closer to Japan on the other side of Asia, and as you point out, near Australia. Now, in some cases, this has caused a protest, right? I mean, this is viewed by some countries as, I don't know whether active aggression is too strong, but what do those countries then assume that the Chinese are up to? What's wrong with having a Chinese vessel near your shores in those cases?
Sure. Well, it comes on the heels of, just constant harassment, illegal fishing, illegal dumping, and really the centerpiece is probably the 9-dash line, which the Chinese claim 90% of the South China Sea. Right. So right there, it kind of says like they're not being good faith actors, but all these incidents all over the place, even what they're doing to the America, European allies, Australia, whatnot, the Philippines, for example. They're really Taiwan, of course. They're really probing. They're constant. They're tired, making people tired. They're expending resources, fuel, and just gradually doing more and more and more, trying to normalize that kind of behavior is what we're really seeing.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Brief's Natsec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025, in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsecedge.com.
The CSIS report that I mentioned documented, it said 64 research and survey vessels operated by various Chinese entities, and then said that 80% of those, so I guess about 50 or so, forgive my math, had links or showed behavior that they suggested were involved in, quote, advancing Beijing's geopolitical agenda. Now, am I right that the United States does this too, right? Takes vessels well beyond its shores and does some hoovering or data mining or talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. So survey and inspection of, critical infrastructure, that's very, very important. We previously talked about the undersea cables and the criticality to communications for military, also the financial markets. So, yeah, we do the same. We also uphold freedom of navigation. It's a very, in an honorable way. So I would say, yes, the United States, sailing, reminding China that we're not going to, listen to your 9-line theory that I think is based on scrolls, ancient scrolls, and was actually deemed illegal, which was a great win for the Philippines. So, I think you can see, from the United States actions, U.S. Navy, we're acting in a very honorable way, really freedom of navigation piece.
Right. Now, under UN rules, the law of the sea, which the United States has not adopted or ratified, I think that the rules are right. You can operate 200 miles from your coastline. The Chinese are venturing far beyond that in these cases, correct?
Sure. So you think about territorial waters, kind of 12 nautical miles, economic exclusion zone up to 200. That includes jurisdiction, but after that 200, then it's the high seas, and jurisdiction gets very murky. That gets even harder when you have vessels that are, shell companies and registered in flags of convenience with foreign crews from the developing world. That's a whole nother set, but generally speaking, what you see is kind of that model of those three. Now, for military operations or what the United States does, people are always fringing and probing. And sometimes that does create kind of diplomatic tension, but it all depends, like what's that vessel doing in those waters. A lot of times we see illegal fishing, but obviously there's smuggling, there's sanctions evasions as well.
So I was going to ask you about specific activities because CSIS used the sweeping phrase geopolitical agenda, which could encompass all kinds of things. Let's talk about what, if any, of these activities would worry the United States. I assume, China's push to find rare earth minerals at the bottom of the sea might worry in terms of competition and economics and so forth, and putting down cables and all that. But are there direct military applications that would be more concerning?
I think so, yeah. So the rare earth piece, the Chinese are winning. Shipbuilding, the Chinese are winning. That's really letting them project a lot of power. Those minerals that I talked about, cobalt, copper, nickel, manganese, that has to do with alloys, but also batteries. People don't realize how important batteries are. Batteries are very much a national security issue. But speaking, comparing to the Indian incident to kind of the United States, what we look at it, I'll start with the India piece and really look at it like the string of pearls theory. And what that really encompasses is the Chinese kind of encircling India, exerting pressure on them, but also keeping tabs on them. So everywhere the Chinese kind of put down a stake, think of that as like a little circle on a map. That becomes a nice set of pearls all the way from mainland China well into the Middle East. Point of emphasis really being the choke points. So there's some very critical choke points that have to do with international trade, just everyday, cargo, and obviously military applications, and that is submarines. So you got the Lokbok Strait, Malacca Strait, Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and the Strait of Hormuz. Those are just vital choke points that the Chinese probably, in my assessment, would really want to have a good idea of what's coming in and out of it under the sea.
So that's an intelligence gathering. Is that your suggestion? That I'm back to the question of what some of these vessels may be doing that would fall more in the not so much commercial but more nefarious category.
Sure. So I look at it as like kind of operational, preparation of the environment. So the vessels that were flagged, I think, in the article that you're referencing, if you take a look at them, what really stands out to me is like, okay, let's look at the crane. What kind of cranes are they working with? A-frames at the stern, port and starboard side cranes. Okay, why do they have those? So they could be putting many different things in the water. A towed array, sometimes vessels will do that. That is essentially a passive hydrophone that is listening what's out there, what's underneath the water. Now you have to maybe let it out a little bit further so it doesn't interfere with the vessel that's towing it, but that's called a towed array. The other one would be launching remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and then of course autonomous underwater vehicles. So when I see those cranes, especially the A-frame, that's what I'm thinking of. Now, at the beginning of of our discussion, I talked about multi-beam echo sounder. Those are usually good to about 4,500 meters. After that, if you want to get deeper into the 6,000 meter range, which is where you would want to install potentially hydrophones to listen for submarine activity, or decoys, whatever you want. Now you would need some kind of AUV. And so when I looked at those vessels and just from past life, that's really what stands out to me. The communications pieces are usually going to be those be enclosures, so you can make some assessments, but you can't really see exactly what is there. But it's really telling to see the infrastructure on the decks of the vessels.
Okay, interesting. Now you mentioned pearls in a necklace, I think was your phrase, of just territorial. And I want to raise a part of the world that I certainly have not paid that much attention to until recently, and that's the Cook Islands. I'm not sure many Americans could find those on a map. It's an island chain, a small one, and a country of only about 15,000 people in the South Pacific. But their EEZ, as you say, exclusive economic zone, I think covers a huge swath of the South Pacific. Mm-hmm. And China has now done a partnership deal with the Cook Islands. Does this then provide potentially just a big chunk of open water for the Chinese to do the sorts of things you're talking about?
Yeah, it sure does. Because the Cook Islands, I think, are one of the very few nations that have actually given the Chinese a permit to do exploration for these kind of seabed minerals, and so that's been very rare. You say Cook Islands, it reminds me of Maldives. Maldives traditionally had the Indians there. Recently, just kicked them out. New president leaning towards China. Mm-hmm. We go on and on with my my pearl analogy, but obviously with Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And we spoke previously too about Gwadar. So those are major maritime infrastructure projects that just continue to stretch, all the way from mainland to Port Sudan, even up into Straits of Hormuz, like we said.
Mm-hmm. Now, last question then, in terms of what the United States can do about any of this, not being a party to the Law of the Sea Treaty, and therefore kind of breaking those rules itself. The United States can't really make a point in the international community that the Chinese are doing something they shouldn't. I mean, is there any, presumably we're not going to start a conflict over this. Is there any action the United States can take? Is it a matter for diplomacy or what?
Yeah, I think it's parallel efforts: diplomacy, economic pressure, supporting allies. NATO. NATO gets beat up a lot, but NATO created Task Force X really for autonomous maritime dominance. I think that's kind of the model that we're going to have to see, because I also said too, shipbuilding. The Chinese are outpacing us on shipbuilding by so much. We're going to have to. And I saw President Trump's address the other night. There was a big piece about shipbuilding. How are we going to do that? Are we going to look to other countries like the South Koreans and the Japanese doing very well on that to get us more assets? And maybe we pair that with the autonomous assets. You could have surface vessels, you could have aerial, you could have underwater vessels. So I think there's going to have to be some kind of combination of everything I just said to keep a pulse on the Chinese. And, do they care about being called? They get called out all the time. The Russians get called out all the time. I mean, the Iranians get called out. They frankly don't care. Right. But we also we can't just let them run over us and keep doing this kind of nefarious action. We have to stand up to them.
All right, we'll leave it there. Nick Thompson, thank you so much. Cipher Brief expert, it's great to have you back with us in the studio. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.